The single most devastating mistake in galactic history happened on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesdays are inherently catastrophic, mind you, but because senior bureaucrat Quibbleton Fluxbottom decided to approve planetary classifications while suffering from what his species called temporal indigestion, a condition roughly equivalent to trying to digest last week's lunch while experiencing next Thursday's hangover. What could possibly go wrong with classifying an entire planet based on paperwork, filled out by someone whose brain was operating in 3 different time zones simultaneously? Everything, as it turns out. The Galactic Council of Reasonable Beings, a name so ironically chosen that it made professional comedians weep with envy, had been rubber-stamping planetary classifications for 17,000 years. The process was so mind-numbingly routine that most bureaucrats could do it while comatose, which coincidentally many of them were. Earth, or as the official documents called it, that wet rock in sector ZZ9 plural Zed Alpha, had been flagged for routine tourism potential assessment. The initial survey team, consisting entirely of blobularian interns who considered a stiff breeze to be extreme weather, had filed their report after spending exactly 14 minutes in Earth's orbit. Moderately damp planet, read their assessment, appears to have some sort of bipedal inhabitants. Gravity seems gravitational. Oxygen levels. Yes, danger rating, Tuesday. For those unfamiliar with blobularian risk assessment scales, Tuesday ranked somewhere between mildly concerning puddle and strongly worded letter from mother-in-law. Quibbleton, whose temporal indigestion was now approaching critical mass, stamped the classification without reading past the word damp. Earth officially became a Class 3 recreational world, suitable for gentle beings seeking mild adventure and reasonably priced souvenirs. The marketing department, thrilled to have something other than crystalline desert world number 47,283 to promote, immediately began designing brochures. Visit Earth, they proclaimed in 17 different languages and 3 interpretive dances, where the most dangerous thing you'll encounter is probably indigestion. Oh, how magnificently wrong they were. The first tour group consisted of 47 beings from 12 different species, all seeking what the brochure promised as a delightfully mundane experience in a charmingly predictable environment. Artisul, the tour guide, a cheerfully optimistic flitterbee named Whizzlebonk Tickletoes, had memorized safety protocols for mild weather variations and potential awkward conversations with locals. Whizzlebonk's species evolved on a planet where the most dangerous creature was a particularly grumpy flower that occasionally made rude comments about your shoes. His preparation for Earth involved reading a pamphlet titled Interacting with Primitive Bipeds, a guide to not being accidentally worshipped. The tour ship, Cosmic Wanderer's Delight, approached Earth on what humans would call a perfectly ordinary Wednesday morning. Captain Fizzlewood Bumbershoot, whose previous experience involved shuttling passengers between space stations that served tea and biscuits, was utterly unprepared for what awaited them. "Attention passengers," Whizzlebonk announced over the intercom with the confidence of someone who had never encountered anything more threatening than lukewarm soup. "We are now approaching the charming Class 3 world of Earth. Please ensure your translation devices are functioning, and remember, the locals are primitive but harmless." Mrs. Glutbenheimer, an elderly Snurfle Wharf tourist who had survived the great jelly bean shortage of 2847, peered out the window with her 14 eyes. "Oh my," she chittered through her translator. "It's quite wet, isn't it?" "Splendidly damp," agreed Whizzlebonk. "Perfect for those seeking a gentle, moisture-rich experience." What they couldn't know, what the survey team had somehow missed during their 14-minute orbital vacation, was that Earth was currently experiencing what humans casually called Tuesday morning in Australia. Down below, a human named Cornelius Brixworth was having his morning coffee when his motion sensors detected something unusual in the sky. Being a remarkably practical man who fixed air conditioners for a living and considered alien contact about as likely as his ex-wife returning his favorite coffee mug, he shrugged and continued reading news about a crocodile that had apparently eaten a lawnmower. "Bloody hell," Cornelius muttered. Not about the aliens he hadn't noticed, but about the crocodile story. Bet that gave him indigestion. The first alien to set foot on Earth was Sergeant Bloopington Wimplefist of the Galactic Tourism Safety Corps. His species, the delicately constituted Wiblonians, required climate-controlled environments and considered anything above a gentle spring breeze to be meteorologically aggressive. Bloopington emerged from the landing craft, consulted his checklist, and promptly encountered what humans call a nice day. The temperature was a balmy 78 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity was reasonable. A gentle breeze carried the scent of eucalyptus and something else. Atmospheric conditions. Acceptable, he reported into his communicator, proceeding with initial reconnaissance of presumably docile wildlife. That's when he met Kevin. Kevin was a koala. Not just any koala. Kevin was a koala having a particularly bad day because someone had moved his favorite eucalyptus tree to make room for a parking meter. Kevin had opinions about this, and Kevin was not shy about expressing them. Bloopington, who had never encountered anything more aggressive than a strongly worded restaurant review, approached Kevin with the confidence of someone whose species' idea of conflict resolution involved apologetic note-writing. "Greetings, primitive Earth creature," Bloopington announced through his translator. "I am a representative of the Galactic Council, here to assess your charming and presumably peaceful planet." Kevin looked at this unusual visitor, considered the cosmic absurdity of the situation, and decided that this was clearly someone responsible for the parking meter situation. Kevin expressed his displeasure in the time-honored koala tradition by making sounds that would make a banshee reconsider its career choices and attempting to give Bloopington an impromptu lesson in tree-climbing techniques. "Hostile contact! Hostile contact!" Bloopington screamed into his communicator while running in circles. "The primitive creature is attempting some form of aggressive cuddling." Back on the ship, Captain Fizzlewood dropped his cup of synthetic tea substitute. "Aggressive cuddling? That's not in any of the manuals." "Sir," reported Communications Officer Twiddlebottom Flurgenheimer, "I'm detecting massive amounts of electromagnetic activity from the planet's surface. It appears to be some sort of communication network." What Twiddlebottom had discovered was the Internet. Specifically, he had stumbled upon a live stream of someone's cat refusing to move out of a cardboard box, while 17,000 viewers left comments in languages that hadn't been invented yet. "My God!" Twiddlebottom exclaimed, his tentacles quivering with terror. "They've weaponized their entertainment systems. This level of simultaneous global communication suggests a hive mind of incomprehensible sophistication." Captain Fizzlewood peered at the readings. "What are they communicating about with such urgent intensity?" "According to the translation matrix, they appear to be engaged in heated debate about whether a hot dog is a sandwich, sir." "Sweet, merciful galaxies," the captain whispered. "They've achieved philosophical warfare." Meanwhile, back on the surface, Bloopington had managed to escape Kevin's enthusiastic greeting by climbing aboard a nearby tour bus. The bus was full of human tourists who had come to see koalas, and who now found themselves face to face with what appeared to be a nervous purple mushroom wearing a spacesuit. "G'day, mate," called out the bus driver, a cheerful human named Marlborough Crumpleton. "You right there, buddy? You look a bit peaky." Bloopington, still traumatized by his encounter with Kevin, stared at these creatures who seemed utterly unperturbed by his presence. One of them, an elderly woman named Prudence Kettleworth, offered him a thermos of tea. "Here, love," she said kindly. "You look like you could use a cuppa. Rough day?" The gesture was so genuinely kind, so utterly unexpected, that Bloopington forgot all his protocols and accepted the tea. It was Earl Grey, perfectly brewed, with just the right amount of milk and sugar. "This is," Bloopington stammered through his translator, This is remarkably pleasant. Are you attempting to poison me?" "Poison you?" Prudence laughed. "Don't be daft. It's just tea, love. Made it this morning. My Nan's recipe." Bloopington took another sip. The tea was, without question, the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. His species survived on nutritionally complete but flavorless paste. This was like discovering the universe had been holding out on him for his entire life. "Your primitive food preparation techniques," he said carefully, "are surprisingly sophisticated." "Primitive?" laughed Marlborough. "Mate, my gran's been making tea for 70 years. She could brew a perfect cup in her sleep upside down during an earthquake." As if summoned by the mention of natural disasters, the ground began to shake gently, not violently, just enough to remind everyone that they were standing on a planet that occasionally liked to stretch and yawn. "Oh," said Prudence casually, steadying her thermos. "Bit of a tremor. Nothing to worry about." Bloopington's translator nearly exploded trying to process the concept of treating seismic activity as casually as commenting on the weather. "Nothing to worry about?" he screamed. "The planet is attempting to shake itself apart." "Nah, mate," Marlborough chuckled. "That's just Tuesday. Sometimes the old girl gets a bit restless. She's been doing it for millions of years. Hasn't killed us yet." Back on the ship, the readings were causing mass hysteria among the crew. The planet was showing signs of what their instruments registered as catastrophic geological instability. Its surface was crawling with predatory fauna, and its dominant species appeared to be conducting psychological warfare through something called memes. "Captain!" squeaked Navigator Bippingworth Flusterbonk. "The planet's electromagnetic signature just spiked. Something called TikTok appears to have achieved critical mass." Captain Fizzlewood studied the readings with growing horror. "And the surface team?" "Sir, according to Sergeant Bloopington's last transmission, he's been adopted by the local inhabitants. They've given him something called biscuits and are attempting to teach him their primitive recreational activity called cricket." "Cricket?" The captain's voice rose 3 octaves. "They have weaponized insects?" "No, sir. Apparently it's some sort of ritual combat involving wooden implements and leather projectiles, sir." Down on Earth, Bloopington was indeed being introduced to cricket by a group of retired humans who had taken him under their collective wing after deciding he was a bit special and needed looking after. They had wrapped him in a blanket, given him a sandwich, and were patiently explaining the rules of cricket with the kind of gentle enthusiasm usually reserved for explaining quantum physics to particularly bright toddlers. "Right then," said Reginald Bumbleton, a former postal worker who considered himself something of an expert on cricket, despite having played it exactly twice in 1987. "The basic idea is quite simple. You have 2 teams, 22 yards, 3 stumps, 6 balls to an over, and the match can last anywhere from 20 overs to 5 days. 5 days? Bloopington's translator crackled with disbelief. "Oh, yes," nodded Beatrice Crumplebottom. "Test matches can go on for ages. Beautiful game, really. Very civilized. Nothing like those Americans with their baseball." "What?" Bloopington asked with the air of someone approaching a potentially explosive concept. "Is baseball?" The humans exchanged glances. Reginald cleared his throat diplomatically. "Well," he said carefully, "it's like cricket, but they've somehow made it both faster and more complicated simultaneously. They hit the ball and run in circles instead of back and forth. Quite mad, really, but they seem to enjoy it." Bloopington processed this information and came to the only logical conclusion. Earth's dominant species had independently evolved multiple forms of ritual combat disguised as entertainment, each more psychologically complex than the last. "How many of these combat sports do you have?" he inquired nervously. "Combat sports?" Beatrice laughed. "Oh, cricket's not combat, dear, it's just a game. If you want combat sports, you should see rugby." "Rugby?" Bloopington's translator began emitting small puffs of smoke. 30 players, 1 ball, minimal rules, maximum enthusiasm." Reginald explained cheerfully. Lovely sport, very character building, teaches young people valuable lessons about pain management and the importance of dental insurance. And then there's Australian rules football, added Beatrice thoughtfully, which is like rugby, but with more running and fewer rules. Quite exciting, really, very aerobic. Fewer rules? Oh yes, magnificent sport. Players jump on each other's backs to catch the ball, rather like human trampolines, really, with more kicking. Meanwhile, back at Galactic Council headquarters, senior bureaucrat Quibbleton Fluxbottom was beginning to suspect that his temporal indigestion might have led to a slight administrative error. The reports coming in from the gentle recreational world were somewhat concerning. "Let me understand this correctly," he said to his assistant, junior bureaucrat Wimplebonk Fluttertwist. "The initial survey classified this planet as harmless, but our current reconnaissance team is reporting indigenous creatures capable of aggressive cuddling, geological instability treated as Tuesday, and recreational activities that appear to be forms of psychological torture." "That's correct, sir. Also, the locals have something called Vegemite, which our xenobiological analysis suggests might be a form of chemical warfare disguised as a breakfast spread. And they consume this voluntarily?" "Enthusiastically, sir. They appear to consider it a delicacy. They spread it on toasted bread and give it to their young as a form of nutritional education. They're training their offspring to consume chemical weapons. Furthermore, sir, they have developed a recreational activity called surfing, where they voluntarily position themselves on top of moving walls of the corrosive dihydrogen monoxide and attempt to remain upright while being propelled at high speeds toward the shore." Quibbleton's temporal indigestion was now approaching levels typically reserved for beings who had accidentally eaten next week's lunch while digesting yesterday's dinner in real time. He pulled up Earth's classification file and began reading it properly for the first time. "Oh my stars and garters!" he exclaimed, his eye stalks turning pale purple with horror. "According to this report, the planet's surface is 71% covered in dihydrogen monoxide. Is that bad, sir?" "Dihydrogen monoxide, you nincompoop. H2O, water. They're living on a planet that's mostly covered in one of the universe's most corrosive substances." Wimplebonk consulted his xenochemistry handbook. "Sir, according to this, prolonged exposure to dihydrogen monoxide can cause severe cellular damage in most known species. How are they still alive?" "That's not the worst part," Quibbleton continued reading. "Listen to this. Atmospheric composition includes 21% free oxygen. 21%. That's not an atmosphere. That's a controlled explosion waiting to happen. And they breathe this? Apparently they require it. They've built their entire civilization around living inside what amounts to a permanently combustible atmosphere while being constantly doused in corrosive liquid." "Sir," Wimplebonk whispered, checking another report. "There's more. According to our atmospheric analysis, their planet regularly experiences electrical storms, where millions of volts of electricity discharge from the sky. And they go outside and watch these events for entertainment. They watch electrical storms for fun. They call it storm chasing, sir. Some of them actively pursue the storms in ground vehicles. They consider it recreational." The magnitude of the classification error was beginning to dawn on both bureaucrats. Earth wasn't a Class 3 recreational world. Earth was what the Galactic Council classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, planets so hostile to life that they were considered theoretically uninhabitable. "Sir," Wimplebonk whispered, "what do we do?" "We do what any sensible galactic bureaucracy does when faced with an error of this magnitude," Quibbleton replied grimly. "We call an emergency meeting and hope someone else takes responsibility." And the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened with the kind of panic usually reserved for galaxy-ending crises. Representatives from 847 different species gathered in the Great Chamber of Reasonable Discussion. where reasonable discussion had been banned for being too time-consuming. Council President Magnifico Bumbershoot III called the session to order by banging his ceremonial gavel made from compressed administrative forms. "Fellow beings," he announced, "we are gathered here today to address what our preliminary reports suggest might be a slight miscalculation regarding planetary classification procedure." "Slight?" shrieked Councillor Flibbergibbet Womplebonk from the Delicate Flower Nebula. "Your slight miscalculation has resulted in 47 tourists being exposed to a death world. Now, President Bumbershoot said diplomatically, "we don't know for certain that it's actually a death world. The classification might simply be incorrect." That's when the emergency transmission came through from the Cosmic Wanderer's Delight. Captain Fizzlewood's voice crackled through the communication system with the kind of barely controlled panic that comes from watching everything you thought you knew about the universe crumble into tiny, confused pieces. "Galactic Council, this is Captain Fizzlewood reporting from Earth orbit. Request immediate evacuation protocols." "Captain," President Bumbershoot replied calmly, "please elaborate on the nature of your emergency." "Sir, the planetary inhabitants have introduced our surface team to their recreational activities. They appear to have weaponized everything, including their food preparation methods, their entertainment systems, and something called small talk, which has somehow reduced 3 of my crew members to tears of existential confusion." "Surely you're exaggerating, Captain." "Sir, they have a sport where they intentionally throw themselves down mountains while strapped to pieces of wood. They call it skiing, and they consider it relaxing." In the council chamber, 8 to 47 different species suddenly became very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone realizes simultaneously that they might have made a terrible mistake. "There must be some explanation," President Bumbershoot said weakly. Captain Fizzlewood's voice continued, "Furthermore, sir, they have somehow domesticated predatory creatures that they keep in their homes for companionship. These creatures spend most of their day sleeping, and the humans seem to consider this adorable, rather than a clear sign of an apex predator conserving energy between kills." Councillor Womplebonk was hyperventilating into a paper bag. "Domestic predators. What manner of beings domesticate their food chain?" "It gets worse, sir," Captain Fizzlewood reported. "They consume heated beverages at temperatures that would be considered torture by 17 different galactic conventions, and they've convinced my sergeant that this is pleasant." The transmission included audio of Bloopington in the background. "Oh yes, lovely cup of tea. Really hits the spot. Could I trouble you for another biscuit? And this cricket fellow here is explaining something called leg before wicket, which sounds absolutely fascinating." President Bumbershoot turned to Senior Bureaucrat Fluxbottom with the expression of someone who had just realized that his entire understanding of reality was about to be severely adjusted. "Fluxbottom," he said very quietly, "please tell me that you didn't classify a planet full of creatures who drink liquid fire and domesticate predators as suitable for gentle tourism." Quibbleton Fluxbottom's temporal indigestion had now evolved into what could only be described as temporal food poisoning, a condition where your digestive system becomes confused about which century it's supposed to be operating in. "Well," he began diplomatically, "there might have been some minor oversights in the classification process." Minor oversights. The collective shriek from 847 different species created a sound that violated several laws of physics and at least 2 building codes. That's when the second transmission came through. This one wasn't from the ship. This one was from Earth itself, specifically from a ham radio operator named Nigel Crumplebottom, who had been listening to the alien communications and decided to join the conversation. "Right then, you lot up there." Nigel's cheerful voice cut through the cosmic panic like a hot knife through bureaucratic butter. "Nigel here, from Perth. Just wanted to let you know, your purple friend down here is getting along lovely with everyone. We've taught him to play cards, and he's absolutely shocking at it, bless him. Also, Mum wants to know if any of you fancy stopping by for dinner tonight. She's making her famous lamb roast. 847 species experienced simultaneous translator malfunctions. "They're," President Bumbershoot whispered, "they're inviting us to dinner?" "After we accidentally invaded their planet," added Councillor Womplebonk. "With a predatory creature they've somehow convinced to commit suicide by cooking," concluded Councillor Flibbergibbet. Nigel's voice continued, "Oh, and Sergeant Bloopington says to tell you not to worry about him. He's having a right good time. We've entered him in the local dart tournament tomorrow. Bit concerned about his aim, mind you, but he's got enthusiasm. And young Kevin here has taught him to play something called Fortnite on the computer. Quite the natural, really." "Fortnite?" President Bumbershoot squeaked. "They've introduced our personnel to virtual warfare simulations?" "Lovely little game," Nigel explained cheerfully. 100 players, 1 island, last being standing wins. Perfect for developing tactical thinking and reflexes. Kevin here usually gets eliminated within the first minute, but he enjoys the parachuting bit. The dart tournament. The humans had weaponized recreational projectiles and were now training their alien guests in their use. Virtual warfare simulations. They were providing advanced tactical training, disguised as entertainment. "Captain Fizzlewood," President Bumbershoot said, in a voice that had given up on sanity and was now just hoping for survival, "please provide a complete assessment of planetary defensive capabilities." "Sir, I'm not sure they have defensive capabilities. They seem to treat potential threats as entertainment opportunities. When our ship appeared in their sky, their global communication network immediately began speculating about whether we were friendly, hostile, or selling something. The leading theory appears to be that we're probably tourists who got lost. They think we're tourists. Sir, one of their information broadcasters, they call them news channels, has started running a story titled Aliens Visit Earth. Local restaurant offers discount for extraterrestrial customers. The restaurant in question is apparently preparing something called fish and chips as a cultural exchange experience. Fish and chips? They take aquatic creatures, coat them in a substance called batter, and submerge them in boiling oil, sir. They serve this with vegetables that have been subjected to the same treatment. They consider it comfort food. They boil their food in oil. As a casual dining experience, sir. They do this while consuming carbonated beverages that could strip paint and watching something called football on viewing devices. Nutty! This was beyond anything in the Galactic Council's experience. They had encountered aggressive species, peaceful species, technologically advanced species, and primitive species. But they had never encountered a species that responded to first contact by offering discounts and making tea. "What?" President Bumbershoot asked weakly. "What are their weapons capabilities?" "Well, sir," Captain Fizzlewood replied, "they have these devices called umbrellas, which they use to defend against precipitation falling from the sky at speeds approaching terminal velocity. And they seem to consider this routine weather management rather than an advanced deflector shield system. They've weaponized weather protection. Also, sir, they have perfected something called sarcasm, which appears to be a form of linguistic warfare so sophisticated that it can inflict psychological damage while simultaneously appearing to be polite conversation. Give me an example." "Well, sir, when Communications Officer Twiddlebottom expressed amazement at their ability to survive on such a hostile planet, one of the locals responded by saying, 'Oh yes, it's absolutely dreadful. Sometimes it rains on weekends, and we have to stay indoors and read books. Terribly inconvenient.' The sarcasm levels were so high that Twiddlebottom is still trying to determine whether they were complaining or boasting. In the council chamber, Councillor Flibbergibbet was now hyperventilating into 2 paper bags simultaneously. Furthermore, the captain continued, they have developed recreational activities that simulate every form of potential death their planet can inflict. They call these sports, and they compete in them. For fun, sir. Examples, President Bumbershoot asked, though he was no longer sure he wanted to know. They voluntarily throw themselves out of aircraft while attached to fabric canopies, sir. They call it skydiving and consider it suitable for birthday celebrations. 847 different species made 847 different sounds of horror. They also voluntarily submerge themselves in the corrosive dihydrogen monoxide while being circled by predatory fish the size of small spacecraft. They call this shark diving and describe it as thrilling. Shark diving? The sharks, sir, appear to be somewhat confused by this behavior and generally leave them alone out of what can only be described as professional courtesy. And there's more, sir. They have something called bungee jumping, where they attach elastic cords to their ankles and throw themselves off tall structures. They do this for the adrenaline rush. They've turned falling to their death into entertainment. There's also something called whitewater rafting, where they navigate rapidly flowing corrosive liquid in small inflatable vessels while being bounced off rocks. They consider this team building. Bihi, this revelation caused a philosophical crisis among the assembled delegates. The humans had achieved something no other known species had managed. They had confused their own predators into submission and turned every possible form of death into a recreational activity. "Captain," President Bumbershoot said very quietly, "are you telling me that Earth's apex predators have entered into some sort of non-aggression pact with the humans?" "Not exactly, sir. It's more like the predators have concluded that anything crazy enough to voluntarily jump into their environment for fun is probably not worth the effort of eating." "Sir," the captain continued, "there's something else. They have a recreational activity called extreme ironing, where they take domestic appliances to dangerous locations and use them to press their clothing. On mountain peaks, sir, underwater, during volcanic eruptions. They iron their clothes in volcanoes? For the challenge, sir. They document these activities and share them on their global communication network for entertainment purposes. That's when the third transmission arrived. This one was from a human television station that had somehow managed to hack into the Galactic Council's communication network. Not through any advanced technology. They had simply asked their 12-year-old intern, Kevin Jr., to see if he could get better reception on the alien radio thing. Kevin Jr., being 12 and therefore possessing the kind of casual confidence that comes from not yet understanding that some things are supposed to be impossible, had successfully patched into the most secure communication system in the galaxy using nothing more than a coat hanger, some copper wire, and what appeared to be a potato. "Hello there, space friends," came the cheerful voice of television presenter Miranda Crumplebonk. "This is Channel 7 News, and we're absolutely delighted to be speaking with you. We understand you've accidentally classified our little planet as suitable for tourism, and we just wanted you to know, no worries at all. These things happen." President Bumbershoot stared at his communication console as though it had personally betrayed him. "They've infiltrated our secure networks with a potato?" "Sounds about right," chuckled Nigel's voice from the background. "Kevin Jr.'s quite clever with electronics. Last week he turned the washing machine into a device for launching tennis balls. Drove the dog absolutely mental with joy." Miranda continued, "Now, we know our planet might seem a bit intense to some of our galactic neighbors, what with the extreme weather, the geological activity, the aggressive fauna, and the fact that our atmosphere is technically a controlled explosion waiting to happen. But honestly, we quite like it here." "Like it?" President Bumbershoot squeaked. "Oh, absolutely. You see, living on what you probably consider a death world has given us a rather unique perspective on life. We've learned to find joy in absolutely everything, because frankly, when you wake up each morning on a planet that's actively trying to kill you in 17 different ways, you tend to develop a sense of humor about these things." Idyll. Councillor Womplebonk was now breathing into 3 paper bags and had requested an emergency therapy session. "For instance," Miranda cheerfully explained, "just this morning we had a lovely earthquake. Barely a 6.2, nothing dramatic, and everyone just sort of steadied their coffee cups and carried on with breakfast. Mrs. Patterson's cat didn't even wake up. They don't evacuate during seismic events. Evacuate? Good heavens, no. Where would we go? The whole planet shakes, love. You just learn to surf it. Like riding a bicycle, really, except the bicycle is a tectonic plate, and occasionally it gets moody. Oh, and speaking of natural disasters, Miranda continued brightly, we've got some absolutely spectacular ones. Tornadoes that can level entire towns. We chase those in vehicles for fun. Hurricanes with winds that can pick up houses. We have parties and name them like pets. Volcanic eruptions that can block out the sun. We set up deck chairs and watch them like fireworks displays. The concept of an entire species that had learned to surf geological disasters and host viewing parties for apocalyptic weather events was causing system failures in translation devices across the galaxy. Captain Fizzlewood's voice crackled through again. Sir, I'm receiving reports that the local inhabitants are organizing some sort of welcome celebration for our crew. They appear to be preparing something called a barbecue, which involves deliberately setting food on fire as a social activity. They're going to burn the food. Apparently it's considered a delicacy, sir. Also, they've invited several large predatory mammals called dogs to attend. These creatures appear to be domesticated wolves that have somehow been convinced that their job is to be enthusiastic about everything and occasionally steal sandwiches. And from the surface, Bloopington's voice could be heard in the background. Oh my, these sausages are delightful. And this creature, Rover, you said, he's absolutely wonderful, so friendly. He keeps trying to give me this slobbery ball. And this other one, Fluffy, she's enormous, like a tiny horse, but fluffy. Sir, Captain Fizzlewood continued, Rover appears to be a 40-kilogram predator that has been trained to play recreational games involving retrieving projectiles. The humans seem to find this entertaining rather than terrifying, and Fluffy appears to be what they call a Great Dane, essentially a horse-sized predator that believes it's a lapdog. A 40-kilogram predator plays games. Yes, sir. They've weaponized their food chain into entertainment systems. Also, sir, there's something called a cat that has apparently adopted Communications Officer Twiddlebottom. Adopted him. A small predatory feline that has decided Twiddlebottom exists solely to provide comfortable seating and regular meals. The creature spends most of its time sleeping on Twiddlebottom while making vibrating sounds the humans call purring. They consider this a sign of affection rather than a predatory threat assessment. The Galactic Council was beginning to realize that Earth wasn't just a death world, it was a death world whose inhabitants had somehow turned survival into a recreational activity and predator management into a form of social interaction. Captain, President Bumbershoot said, with the air of someone who had given up on understanding anything and was now just documenting the impossible, what is your crew's current status? Well, sir, Sergeant Bloopington has learned to play something called fetch with the domesticated predator and appears to be having the time of his life. Communications Officer Twiddlebottom has been adopted by a creature called a cat, which seems to have concluded that he exists solely to provide comfortable seating. Navigator Bippingworth has become fascinated by their method of transportation. They use controlled explosions to propel themselves around in metal containers. And Engineer Wibbleforth has been introduced to something called coffee, which appears to be a legal stimulant that they consume in large quantities while discussing the weather. Controlled explosions. They call them cars, sir. Apparently, every human owns a personal explosive propulsion device and uses it for routine errands like purchasing groceries. They have an entire infrastructure built around this technology, including designated pathways for high-speed explosive device navigation. 847 different species contemplated the implications of an entire civilization that had democratized explosive technology for mundane domestic purposes. Sir, the captain continued. "I'm beginning to suspect that our classification system might need some adjustment." Some adjustment? The collective scream from the council chamber created a small sonic boom that cracked the decorative ceiling. That's when Miranda's voice came through again. "Oh, don't you worry about reclassification. We understand we might be a bit much for some species. Tell you what, why don't you just put up a nice warning sign? Something like Earth, inhabited by creatures who consider mortal peril a form of entertainment. Visit at your own risk. Tea and biscuits available." But here's the thing," Miranda continued cheerfully. "We'd absolutely love to have you visit properly. We've got so much to show you. There's this lovely place called Yellowstone, where the ground is heated by molten rock from deep underground. Perfect for a relaxing holiday. And Death Valley, which sounds ominous, but it's really quite pleasant if you bring enough water and don't mind temperatures that can cook an egg on the pavement." President Bumbershoot was making small whimpering sounds. "Oh, and we've got the Amazon rainforest, which is full of the most delightful creatures. There are tiny frogs whose skin contains enough poison to kill several elephants, absolutely adorable little things, and spiders the size of dinner plates that can jump, very athletic, and snakes that can unhinge their jaws to swallow things larger than their own heads. Remarkable evolutionary adaptation, really." Councillor Flibbergibbet had progressed to hyperventilating into a small oxygen tank. "And if you're more interested in marine experiences," Miranda bubbled on, "we've got lovely coral reefs with the most beautiful jellyfish. Some of them are nearly transparent and incredibly venomous, like living crystal sculptures that can kill you. And there are fish with teeth like razors that travel in groups and can strip the flesh from bones in minutes. They're called piranhas, and the locals swim with them for fun. They swim with carnivorous fish." "For fun?" President Bumbershoot managed to squeak. "Oh yes, and that's just the freshwater activities. In the ocean, we have creatures called blue-ringed octopi that are the size of golf balls, but contain enough venom to kill 26 adult humans. Beautiful blue rings, though. Nature's way of saying, admire from a distance. Although some of our marine biologists study them up close because, well, someone has to." From orbit, Captain Fizzlewood was monitoring all communications with growing amazement. "Sir, I'm now receiving additional reports from the surface team. It appears that Engineer Wibbleforth has been introduced to something called extreme sports tourism. I'm afraid to ask. The locals have something called cage diving with great white sharks, sir. They put you in a metal cage and lower you into the ocean, where predatory fish the size of small spacecraft attempt to bite through the cage while you observe them from inside. And people pay for this experience? Apparently it's considered educational, sir. They also have volcano boarding, where they slide down the sides of active volcanic mountains on pieces of wood. For the thrill of it. Sliding down volcanoes? And something called ice climbing, where they scale frozen waterfalls using metal spikes in sub-zero temperatures, while the ice is actively trying to fall off the cliff and crush them. Miranda's voice continued from the surface. "Oh, and we mustn't forget about our weather. We have the most exciting atmospheric conditions. There are places where the wind can reach over 200 miles per hour. We call them hurricanes, and we name them like old friends. And tornadoes that can pick up entire buildings and rearrange the landscape. Absolutely fascinating meteorological phenomena. You name your natural disasters. Well, of course. This year we've had Hurricane Bernadette, who was quite the character, knocked down half the trees in Florida but missed the oranges, bless her. And Tornado Timothy, who decided to redecorate downtown Kansas by moving all the buildings about 6 blocks to the left. Very artistic, really. Councillor Womplebonk was now requiring medical attention. "And our winter sports," Miranda continued enthusiastically. "We have skiing, which is controlled falling down mountains, snowboarding, which is like skiing but with more style, and ice hockey, which is gladiatorial combat on frozen water while everyone wears knife shoes. Knife shoes? Ice skates, love. Blades attached to boots for gliding across frozen surfaces, perfectly safe as long as you don't fall, or get checked into the boards, or take a puck to the face. Character building, really. Back on the surface, Bloopington was getting his first real education in human recreational philosophy. He was now sitting in a pub, a social establishment where humans gathered to consume fermented beverages and engage in friendly competition, watching something called darts while learning about the complex social ritual known as buying rounds. "Right then, purple mate," said his new friend, a construction worker named Brixworth Crumpleton. "Your turn to throw. Just aim for the board and try not to hit anyone. Well, except metaphorically. In darts, hitting someone is actually good unless you're talking about the actual hitting, which is bad. Makes sense?" Not particularly," Bloopington admitted, holding a dart like it might explode. "Perfect! You're getting the hang of it already. English logic is like that, completely sensible once you stop trying to understand it." Bloopington threw the dart. It missed the board entirely and embedded itself in a wooden beam 6 feet away. "Lovely throw!" exclaimed Beatrice Crumplebottom, who was keeping score despite having no apparent understanding of mathematics. "Very creative trajectory." "I missed completely." "Yes, but you missed with style. That's worth something in my book." Speaking of which, would you like to try the quiz machine? The quiz machine, as it turned out, was an electronic device that asked incredibly difficult questions about human culture and rewarded correct answers with small amounts of money. The questions ranged from what is the capital of Tasmania, to who won the 1966 World Cup, to what is the meaning of life. Bloopington, whose universal translator was struggling with concepts like Tasmania and meaning of life, approached the machine with the same trepidation he might show a potentially hostile alien artifact. "Don't worry," said Marlborough, patting him encouragingly on the shoulder. "Nobody actually knows the answers. That's rather the point. It's about the journey, not the destination. Very philosophical, really." Meanwhile, back in space, the Galactic Council was trying to process the continuous stream of impossible information coming from Earth. "Captain Fizzlewood," President Bumbershoot said weakly, "please tell me your crew is not participating in any more of their recreational activities." "Well, sir, Navigator Bippingworth has been invited to something called a barbecue tomorrow, where they will cook food over open flames while consuming fermented beverages and engaging in competitive lawn games." "Competitive lawn games?" "Apparently they have weaponized their gardening activities, sir, something called croquet, where they use hammers to strike balls through metal hoops, and horseshoes where they throw iron projectiles at stakes driven into the ground. They've turned landscaping into a sport. Also, sir, Engineer Wibbleforth has been introduced to something called karaoke, where humans take turns performing vocal entertainment while others consume alcohol and offer encouraging commentary." "Vocal entertainment?" "They sing, sir, often badly. Apparently, the quality of the performance is inversely related to the amount of enjoyment experienced by both performer and audience." This concept was so alien to most galactic species that several translators simply shut down rather than attempt to process it. "Sir," Captain Fizzlewood continued, "there's something else. The humans have been asking about our home planets. They want to know if we have any extreme sports or dangerous wildlife they could visit. They want to visit other Deathworlds. Apparently, sir, they find the concept of alien environments exciting and challenging. And they've asked specifically about planets with unusual gravity, aggressive fauna, or hostile weather conditions. One of them suggested that low-gravity mountain climbing might be absolutely brilliant. They want to export their recreational death-seeking to other planets?" From the surface, Nigel's voice crackled through. "Oh, that would be lovely. We're always up for a bit of adventure tourism. Just last week, young Kevin here went bungee jumping off the harbour bridge for his birthday. Magnificent fun. Would love to try it on a planet with different gravity. Imagine the possibilities. The implications were staggering. The humans weren't content to turn their own Deathworld into a playground. They wanted to expand their recreational danger-seeking to the entire galaxy. "Sir," Miranda's voice came through again, "we've been thinking, and we'd love to establish some sort of cultural exchange program. We could send some of our people to visit your planets, carefully, of course, with proper safety equipment, and you could send more tourists here. We'll set up proper orientation programs. Nothing too intense to start with, maybe just a nice day at the beach." "A day at the beach?" "Oh yes, lovely sandy shores, warm sunshine, gentle waves, maybe a bit of surfing. We've got some beautiful beaches in Australia. Just mind the sharks, the jellyfish, the crocodiles, the blue-ringed octopi, the stonefish, the sea snakes and the drop bears. Oh, and the rip currents, and the sunburn. But other than that, perfectly safe." President Bumbershoot was now making sounds that weren't translating into any known language. "Actually," Miranda continued brightly, "we were thinking we could start with something really gentle, maybe a nice bushwalk in the Blue Mountains. Lovely scenery, fresh air, a bit of exercise. Just watch out for the funnel web spiders, the snakes, the drop bears, the getting lost and dying of exposure, and the occasional bushfire. But the views are absolutely spectacular." "Drop bears?" President Bumbershoot managed to whisper. "Oh, don't worry about drop bears, love. They're mostly just a bit of fun we have with tourists. Completely harmless. Probably. Well, mostly harmless. Actually, you know what? Best not to mention drop bears. Don't want to put anyone off." The fact that humans had invented fictional predators to frighten visitors, then admitted they were fictional while somehow making them sound more terrifying, was causing philosophical crises among species that prided themselves on logical thinking. "Captain," President Bumbershoot said desperately, "what is the current psychological state of your crew?" "Well, sir, they appear to be enjoying themselves. Sergeant Bloopington has learned to play something called pool and is apparently developing what the locals call a decent break. Communications Officer Twiddlebottom has been adopted by 3 different cats and is learning about the complex social hierarchy of feline territorial management. Navigator Bippingworth has been invited to join a cricket club and is being taught the fundamentals of spin bowling, whatever that means. And Engineer Wibbleforth has discovered fish and chips and declared it the greatest culinary achievement in galactic history. They're adapting to the local culture? Sir, they've gone native. Bloopington has started using human expressions like bloody hell and fair dinkum. Twiddlebottom is planning to adopt a kitten. Bippingworth has purchased something called a cricket bat and is practicing in the ship's cargo bay. And Wibbleforth has asked if we can extend our mission to include something called a proper British breakfast. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence. Their trained diplomatic personnel, specialists in first contact protocols and interspecies relations, had been completely assimilated by a species that considered living on a death world to be quite pleasant, really. "Sir," Captain Fizzlewood added, "there's one more thing. The humans have offered to help us update our planetary classification system. They say they've got some suggestions for categories we might want to add, such as, well, sir, they've suggested classifications like moderately exciting, properly dangerous, adequately challenging, and Australian. Apparently, Australian is a classification all by itself. What does Australian mean in their classification system? According to Sergeant Bloopington's latest report, sir, it means everything is trying to kill you, but the locals are so friendly, you'll have a lovely time anyway." That's when the 4th transmission came through. This one was from the Australian Prime Minister, who had apparently decided that first contact was primarily a tourism opportunity. "G'day, space mates," came the cheerful voice of Prime Minister Bumblebottom Crumpleton. "Heard you've been having a chat with our locals. Thought I should introduce myself officially. We're absolutely chuffed to meet you. Now, I understand there might have been some confusion about our planet's danger rating, and I just wanted to clarify. We're perfectly safe. Perfectly safe? Well, relatively speaking. I mean, sure, we've got a few challenges. The occasional shark attack, spider bite, crocodile incident, bushfire, cyclone, drought, flood, earthquake, and venomous snake encounter. But honestly, you get used to it. Character building, really. President Bumbershoot was now lying on the floor of the council chamber, staring at the ceiling and making small, whimpering noises. The thing is, the Prime Minister continued, we Australians have always been a practical people. When life gives you a continent full of things that want to kill you, you learn to make friends with them. Take our crocodiles, for instance. Magnificent creatures. We've turned crocodile wrestling into a tourist attraction. Crocodile wrestling? Oh yes. Perfectly safe as long as you know what you're doing. Which most people don't, but that's rather the point. Adventure tourism at its finest. Sir, Captain Fizzlewood interjected, I'm receiving reports that the locals are planning some sort of welcome ceremony for tomorrow. Something called a music festival. A music festival? Apparently it involves large numbers of humans gathering in an outdoor area to listen to amplified sound while consuming various substances and engaging in rhythmic movement. They call it dancing. And this is safe? Well, sir, according to the safety briefing, the main risks include dehydration, hearing damage, exhaustion, getting lost, stampedes, and something called festival food poisoning. But apparently these are considered part of the experience. They've weaponized entertainment. From the surface, Bloopington's voice came through. Oh, this sounds absolutely brilliant. They've explained that music festivals are a form of cultural expression, where people gather to celebrate good vibes and sick beats. I'm not entirely sure what those terms mean, but everyone seems very excited about them. The Prime Minister's voice continued, Now we've been thinking about this cultural exchange business, and we reckon we could set up a proper program. Start small, you know. Maybe a few of your people could come down for a weekend in Sydney. We'll show them the Opera House. Take them for a harbour cruise. Maybe a quick trip to the zoo. The zoo? Oh yes, lovely place. Full of our local wildlife in nice, safe enclosures. Well, mostly safe. There was that incident with the cassowary last month. But these things happen, and the koala that learned to pick locks was really more amusing than dangerous. Mostly. What? President Bumbershoot asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Is a cassowary. Magnificent bird. About 6 feet tall, can't fly, but can run at 30 miles per hour and has claws like carving knives. Basically a dinosaur that survived extinction and developed anger management issues. Beautiful plumage, though. And you keep these in zoos? Well, we try to. Clever birds, cassowaries. They're always finding ways to make life interesting for the zookeepers. Educational, really. Teaches you to pay attention to your surroundings. The concept of a species that kept angry dinosaur descendants in captivity for educational purposes was causing mass system failures in the council chamber's translation equipment. But don't worry, the Prime Minister continued cheerfully. We'll start your people off easy. Maybe just a nice day at Bondi Beach. Beautiful spot. Lovely surf, friendly sharks. Friendly sharks. Oh yes, most of our sharks are quite reasonable. The great whites are just misunderstood, really. Big softies once you get to know them. And the tiger sharks are always up for a chat. Very social creatures. At this point, senior bureaucrat Fluxbottom stood up slowly, walked to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, pulled out a bottle of something purple and alcoholic, and began drinking directly from it. Sir, junior bureaucrat Fluttertwist asked nervously. Fluttertwist, Fluxbottom said calmly, I want you to create a new form. What kind of form, sir? A resignation form. For the entire Galactic Council. We're clearly not qualified to classify planets inhabited by beings who consider shark socializing to be recreational activity. Meanwhile, Miranda's voice came through again. Oh, we've just had a lovely idea. What if we created a special welcome package for galactic tourists? We could include a map of safe walking areas, a guide to local wildlife, a first aid kit, and a complimentary bottle of sunscreen. Oh, and one of those hats with corks hanging from strings, very practical for keeping the flies away. The flies are dangerous too. Well, not dangerous exactly, just persistent, cheeky little things. They like to explore your ears and nostrils. Consider it part of the authentic Australian experience. From orbit, Captain Fizzlewood was monitoring the increasing chaos in the council chamber with professional interest. "Sir, should I prepare for immediate evacuation?" "No, Captain," President Bumbershoot said, with the calm of someone who had passed through panic and emerged into a strange state of acceptance. I think we need to accept that our understanding of the universe has been fundamentally challenged. Sir, these creatures, these humans, they've achieved something we thought was impossible. They've turned a Deathworld into a tourist destination. They've domesticated their predators. They've made friends with their natural disasters. They've turned survival into entertainment and made it look fun. And, sir, I think we need to learn from them. That's when the final transmission came through. Not from the surface, not from the ship, but from deep space. It was a message that had been traveling for several hours, broadcast on all emergency frequencies. "Attention all vessels in the sector ZZ9 plural Z Alpha region. This is the Galactic Emergency Response Team. We have received reports of a code red situation involving tourists stranded on a Class 12 Deathworld. Please respond with evacuation requirements and casualty estimates." The entire council chamber fell silent. "Emergency Response Team, this is President Bumbershoot of the Galactic Council. Please be advised that the tourists are not stranded." "Repeat, President Bumbershoot. Did you say not stranded?" "Correct. They've been invited to a barbecue." "A barbecue? On a Deathworld?" "Emergency Response Team, please be advised that planetary classification for Earth has been revised. Please update your records to reflect that Earth is inhabited by a species that has successfully weaponized hospitality." Weaponized hospitality. "They've turned customer service into a form of psychological warfare so effective that our highly trained diplomatic staff have gone native and learned to play cricket." There was a long pause. "President Bumbershoot, are you requesting immediate psychiatric evaluation?" "Emergency Response Team, I'm requesting that you add Earth to the mandatory study curriculum for all diplomatic academies and possibly therapy schools." "Sir, these humans have solved the ultimate paradox, how to live on a planet that's constantly trying to kill you and somehow make it seem like the most reasonable lifestyle choice in the galaxy. Now, and that's how Earth became the first planet in galactic history to be classified as both a death world and a mandatory diplomatic study site, with the official designation, "Approach with extreme caution, bring good manners, and be prepared to question everything you thought you knew about the relationship between danger and fun." No. The revised tourism brochures, when they were finally approved by a committee of psychologists, xenobiologists, and risk assessment specialists, simply read, "Earth, where the impossible becomes routine, the deadly becomes delightful, and you'll leave wondering why your own planet is so boring." Within 6 months, Earth had the longest waiting list for tourism applications in galactic history, and humans had inadvertently become the universe's most effective ambassadors by proving that with the right attitude, anything could be turned into a good time.